It was a crisp autumn morning, and the lobby of Greenway National Bank buzzed with activity. Employees in sharp suits moved briskly behind polished counters, while customers, some impatient and others simply passing time, waited in line. Among them was Daniel Carter, an elderly black man with a weathered face and a kind smile. His neatly pressed suit was simple yet dignified, and he carried a briefcase that bore the marks of many years of use. Daniel walked with a deliberate pace, his cane tapping softly against the marble floors. As Daniel approached the counter, the room seemed to shift slightly. Two employees, Sarah and David, both in their mid-30s, exchanged a glance. Their polished demeanor faltered just slightly, and a subtle frown crept onto Sarah's face. "Can I help you?" Sarah asked. Her tone clipped as Daniel stepped forward. "Yes, young lady," Daniel replied with a polite smile. "I'd like some assistance with my account." David, who was standing nearby, leaned in and whispered something to Sarah, barely audible to the other customers. "Another one of those time wasters," he muttered under his breath. Sarah sighed loudly, her impatience visible as she eyed Daniel up and down. "Do you even have an account here?" she asked, her words dripping with condescension. Daniel remained calm, his smile unwavering. "Yes, ma'am, I do. I've been a customer here for over 20 years. "Right," Sarah replied skeptically. "Well, we'll need to see some ID." Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, handing over his identification with steady hands. Sarah took it and squinted at it, her expression remaining dubious. "You sure this is your account?" David interjected, stepping closer. "We've had some incidents before." Daniel raised an eyebrow but kept his voice calm. "I'm certain, young man. I've been banking here since before you started working." The subtle jab didn't sit well with David. He scoffed and muttered, "Some people think they can just walk in here and waste our time." Emboldened by David's attitude, Sarah pushed the ID back across the counter. "Look, sir, we're very busy today. Maybe you should come back when you're more prepared." Daniel's expression remained composed, though a flicker of disappointment passed through his eyes. "I am prepared," he said softly. "I'd appreciate it if you could check my account." Instead of responding, Sarah motioned to a security guard standing near the entrance. The guard, a burly man with a stern face, walked over, his presence adding an unnecessary layer of intimidation. "Is there a problem here?" the guard asked, his voice firm. "No problem," Daniel said evenly. "I'm just trying to access my account." Sarah leaned over and whispered something to the guard, who nodded curtly. "Sir, I think it's best if you leave for today," the guard said, gesturing toward the door. Daniel stood still for a moment, his grip tightening slightly on his cane. The room seemed to grow quieter as other customers took notice of the scene. Without raising his voice, Daniel replied, "Are you asking me to leave without resolving my business here?" "Yes," Sarah said bluntly. "You're holding up the line." Daniel looked at her for a long moment, his gaze steady but unreadable. Then, with a slight nod, he turned and began to walk toward the exit, his cane tapping softly once again. The door closed behind him, leaving the employees to resume their work, oblivious to the storm brewing just beneath the surface. Days later, Daniel returned to the bank, his steps deliberate and posture unwavering. This time, he carried a neatly folded document in his hand. The late afternoon sun streamed through the glass doors as customers bustled about the lobby. At the reception desk sat Ethan, a young employee engrossed in his phone. Without looking up, Ethan gestured dismissively. "Yes, what do you need?" "Good afternoon," Daniel said, offering a polite smile. "I was wondering if I could speak to someone about opening a corporate account." Ethan finally looked up, his expression immediately turning cold. He scanned Daniel's appearance, the slightly worn coat, the old-fashioned hat, and smirked. "Corporate account? You sure you're in the right place?" "Sir?" he asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Yes, I'm sure," Daniel replied calmly. "I'd like to speak to a manager if possible." Before Ethan could respond, Sophia, another employee, walked by and overheard the conversation. She glanced at Daniel, then leaned in to whisper to Ethan, Does he look like someone who could even afford a corporate account? Probably just wasting our time. Daniel caught the remark but chose to remain composed. He repeated his request, this time addressing both of them. I'd appreciate it if someone could assist me. I have all the necessary documents with me. Ethan exchanged a glance with Sophia, rolling his eyes. Look, sir, this is a high-end financial institution. We don't have time for whatever it is you're trying to do here. The sharpness in Ethan's tone drew the attention of other customers and staff nearby. Some whispered among themselves, while others looked visibly uncomfortable. Sophia stepped forward, her voice firm but condescending. Sir, we have policies in place. Without an appointment and proper credentials, we can't entertain requests like yours. And frankly, this branch handles clients of a certain caliber. The words stung, but Daniel maintained his composure. I understand policies and respect them. However, I believe if you take a moment to review my paperwork, you'll see that I meet the requirements. Sophia let out a short laugh. Paperwork? You're kidding, right? Sir, I think it's best if you take your business elsewhere. We're quite busy here. By now, a small crowd had formed. Some customers stared in disbelief at the way Daniel was being treated, while others averted their gaze, unwilling to intervene. Ethan, sensing the growing tension, decided to end the interaction. All right, that's enough, he said loudly. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You're disrupting the workflow here. Daniel hesitated, glancing around at the onlookers. His calm demeanor never wavered, but there was a flicker of disappointment in his eyes. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a neatly folded document. Perhaps if you look at this, it might clear up any misunderstandings, he said. Ethan barely glanced at the paper before pushing it back toward Daniel. I said leave. We don't have time for this. Sophia nodded in agreement, stepping closer to Daniel as if to physically usher him out. You heard him. This isn't the place for you. At that moment, Mia, a junior banker, stepped forward hesitantly. She had been watching the interaction from her desk and felt increasingly uncomfortable with how things were unfolding. Maybe we should just take a look at his documents, Mia said softly, addressing Ethan and Sophia. It won't hurt to check. Ethan shot her a glare. Mia, stay out of this. We know what we're doing. But Mia persisted, her voice firmer this time. He's not causing any trouble. He's just asking for assistance. Isn't that our job? Sophia turned to Mia, her tone icy. Mia, if you want to waste your time, go ahead. But don't expect us to entertain every random walk-in who thinks they can open a corporate account. The tension in the room was palpable. Daniel, sensing the hostility, decided to step back. It's all right, he said quietly. I didn't mean to cause a scene. I'll take my business elsewhere. He turned to leave, his steps slow but dignified. As he reached the door, he paused for a moment, glancing back at the staff who had dismissed him so quickly. There was no anger in his eyes, only a quiet sadness. Without another word, he walked out into the cold afternoon, leaving the murmurs of the onlookers behind.